الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. We started the weekly sessions after the month of Ramadan, and inshallah we'll go on for about 10 sessions before we break again for Muharram and Safar. And during this 10 sessions, as you have seen the announcement, the theme that I have selected is the concept of Shiaism from Imamiyya to Ithna Ashariya. Let me explain what I mean by that. I'm sure, many of you must be thinking, what is this? There's no new mazhab. It's a concept where I wanted to emphasize on the issue of the Imamat, of the Imams other than Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Because when we look at the literature that we have and the theme of the talks in the majalis and the Islamic Shia centers, I think, people know quite a lot about the Imamat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But when it comes to the other Imams, what is the basis of the Imamat? And we have to realize that when we talk about the concept of Shiaism, especially when we talk about the Imamat of the present Imam, it is absolutely necessary for us to have this ma'rifah, an understanding about the basis of the Imamat of all the Imams. And that's why, the theme from Imamiyya to Ithna Ashariya. Now, some of the important words are, we must clearly understand first. How do we define a Shia? The word Shia or Shi'i, this is singular as well as plural. In Arabic there is no, you can't say Shia and Shias. In English we do that. Shiites. But in Arabic the word Shia is singular as well as plural. And basically it applies to, the definition would be a Muslim who believes in Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam as the first rightful successor of the Prophet, immediately after the Prophet. And so the term Shia or Shi'i is a contrast to, Sunni Muslim. A Sunni Muslim is somebody who does not believe in Ali as the immediate successor of the Prophet. Then we go on to the second term, Imami. What does Imami mean? Imami means those Shias who have this concept that Imam is somebody who is divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not based on selection of the people. This term applies to all the Shias, whether they are commonly people call the Ismailis the Imamis, but we are equally Imami in a sense. We also believe in the concept of Imamat as a position bestowed upon individuals by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The contrast to that would be the Zaydi Shia. The Zaydi, of course, there are many subgroups among Zaydiya themselves, but the common theme of the Zaydi Shias is that we call them Shias because they believe that Ali is the first successor of the Prophet. So they are qualified to be called Shias, but they are not Imam. They believe in Abu Bakr and Umar also. They don't believe in Uthman. And then they say after Imam Hussein, basically they say any descendant of Ali and Fatima, a Sayyid, a Fatimi Sayyid, who is knowledgeable and who basically takes upon himself the issue of jihad to promote Islam, to do Amr bil Ma'ruf. That person, that Sayyid, Ali Fatima, is eligible to become an Imam. So it's not an issue appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. According to that concept, during our time, Imam Khomeini was definitely being an Imam according to Zaydiyya. He was a Sayyid, he was a Faqih. That is one condition they have, a Mushtahid, and somebody who basically did jihad. Then we come to the third term, Isna Ashariya. The word Isna Ashar means 12. Ashar means 10, and Isna Ashar means 12. And Isna Ashari means those Shia Imamiyya who believe in 12 Imams. This, you use the term to contrast ourselves with the Ismailis. Ismailis are also Shia Imami, but they are not Isna Ashari. They don't believe in 12 Imams. They believe in, one group of them, the Agha Khanis, believe in 42 Imams. The Bohri Ismailis, they believe in 22 Imams. And so these are the important terms. Keep in mind, Shia, Imami, Isna Ashari. And the theme that we have is basically to talk about the Imamat of the Imams after Amir al-Mu'mineen. Of course, we'll be talking about Amir al-Mu'mineen also, but very briefly, going on to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein also very briefly, then focusing more on the basis of the Imamat of the other Imams. Some more important terminologies which must be clarified right in the beginning. The concept of Imamat. According to the Shia point of view, Imamat is a universal authority given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to an individual in all matters, religious as well as worldly affairs. There is no division of secular and spiritual as far as the concept of Nubuwwat or Imamat is concerned. Some of the important qualities of an Imam from the Shia point of view would be, number one, infallibility. We believe he must be Ma'soom. Number two, he must be Afdal, the most suitable or the most superior. Number three, he must be most knowledgeable. And number four, he should be without any physical or moral blemish. Something which would basically make the people run away from that individual. One important thing, again, which links us to the theme is the issue of Imamat is established by two methods. One is Nas, which means the appointment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the other is if they are able to, back up with a miracle to, along with their claim. So keep those issues in mind because that will be the focus and these words will come again and again. We will be talking more about the first of the method of establishing Imamat, and that is Nas, appointment by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what do we mean by that? Nas basically means a statement which proves that an individual has been appointed to this position of Imamat. The person who is appointed by Allah through Rasul or directly is known as Mansus from Nas. So an Imam who is Mansus rather than an Imam who had been democratically elected. So that's where we differentiate. When we say Mansus min Allah, I mean somebody who's been appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the Nas, the concept of appointment, can take three different forms. Either it is a verse from the Holy Quran, or it is a hadith of the Prophet, or it is a statement of the preceding Imam. Since we already know, for example, the fourth Imam is the rightful Imam after Imam Hussein, whatever he says will be considered to be acceptable enough for appointment of the next Imam. Now, when we look at this concept of appointment of the Imams, I would just like to very briefly summarize how this has taken place in history. Number one, the Prophet appointed Amir al-Mu'mineen at various places, and I'm sure all Shias know about it. All the way from Da'wat al-Zulashira to the event of Ghadir, and in between those two important events. Number two, we know very clearly that the Prophet had also mentioned the Mahdi as the last Imam. and the Sunnis also believe in that. Number three, which is a very important point, we'll discuss about this later on tonight, that he also gave the number of the Imams who are going to come after him. Number four, besides Ali, we also know that he had specifically mentioned Hassan and Hussein because they were alive in his lifetime as the Imams. And then number five, we know that not in public gatherings, but to selected companions of his, people like Jabir bin Abdullah Ansari, the Prophet even gave the names of the Imams after Imam Hassan, after Imam Hussein. And finally, each Imam introduced the next Imam to the trustworthy companions. It depended on the circumstances, why they would not do it publicly for everyone. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it will be done only in the circle of the trustworthy companions, depending on the political circumstances. Now, when we talk about this issue of, nas and appointment, keep in mind that writing of hadith was forbidden among the Muslims for one entire century. The Khulafa were against preserving and writing hadith. So, when we are asked, well, why don't we have so many hadiths? The issue is that were the statements of Rasulullah preserved? And we talked about this in detail, I think, 2 years ago when we looked at Ilm al-Hadith, to the extent that even Khulafa, especially the second Khalifa, asked people to bring whatever they had recorded in the written form, the hadith of Rasulullah, and they thought maybe he's going to compile it. He put it together and then he burned it. And this was the official policy of the Khulafa, which went on for the first century of the Islamic calendar. So writing of hadith, preserving it in written form, was discouraged by the Khulafa. Number two, wherever the ahadith were even verbally quoted or recorded in written form, there was this process of deleting, changing words, or even if it was there, the meaning was interpreted, diluted. And even the Shias, keep in mind when we talk about this issue of the appointment, especially done by Rasulullah, even the Shias, because of the political circumstances, exercised self-censor. They would not publicly go in and disclose everything to everyone, even not to their own Shia circles, because there was always this fear that they don't know who is this other person sitting in the gathering. So these are the context of where the issue of nas comes in, and we have to keep that in mind. And so for tonight, what I'm going to do is talk about two statements from the Prophet of Islam about the appointment of Imamat of a general kind. We know about Amir al-Mu'mineen specifically, but tonight we are only going to deal with the two general nas about the Imamat of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam in general. And the first one is the famous hadith known as Hadith al-Saqalayn. These are the words of the Prophet uttered in Ghadir. I'm sure all of you even remember it by heart, where he says, إِنِّي تَارِكُمْ فِيكُمُ السَّقَلَيْنِ مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِمَا لَمْ تَضِلُّ بَعْدِي. I'm leaving two things, two precious things among you. As long as you hold on fast to both of them, you will never go astray after me. One is Kitabullah, and the second is Itrati, my family or my descendants. Now this statement, we need to look at it from two perspectives. One is the issue of the status of this hadith, the authenticity or the validity of this hadith. And secondly, we have to look at the implications of this hadith of the Prophet. As far as the status of Hadith al-Ghadir is concerned, this is a hadith which is beyond any shadow of doubt. No credible Sunni alim can ever stand up and say that this is not an authentic hadith. And the reason I'm putting is credible alim means somebody who really is an alim. Somebody who doesn't know much about Islam, that they can make their own opinions. For example, You know, among the Sunnis, there are 6 books of the collections of hadith, which are known as As-Sihah Sitta, collectively. There's 6 Sahih books, which include Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan of Ibn Majah, Sunan of Abu Dawood, Sahih of Tirmizi, and Sunan of Imam Nasai. These 4 books are considered to be the topmost collections of hadith among the Sunnis. And they're collectively given this name. As-Sihah Sitta means 6, authentic books of hadith. Hadith al-Ghadir has been quoted in 5 of these 6 books of hadith of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The only exception is the individual known as Al-Bukhari. He is the one who has not talked about it. But Imam Muslim has talked about it, Ibn Majah has it, Abu Dawood has in his book, At-Tirmizi, and even Nasai has this narration in his book. But Bukhari not writing it doesn't mean anything, because if Muslim is there, because from the Sunni perspective, if there is a hadith which has been quoted by both Muslim and Bukhari, it is considered to be the best one. If it is quoted only by one of them, Bukhari only or Muslim only, then it is again second best. And so you have 5 of the 6 books of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah who have recorded this hadith of Rasulullah in Ghadir, where he mentioned that I'm leaving 2 things. One is the book of Allah, and the other is my family as a source of guidance. As far as the research is concerned, the research done on this book, Alhamdulillah, our ulama have worked on it quite a lot. The first person really to work on this in a very extensive manner was a Shia Islam from India, Mir Hamid Hussain Musavi from Lucknow. His book, known as Abaqatul Anwar, is a very famous book, and he wrote this book in response to a Sunni alim whose name was Shah Abdul Aziz Dahlawi. And Shah Abdul Aziz Dahlawi had written a book in Farsi, in Persian, refuting the Shia madhab. And the name he had given was Tuhfa Isna Ashariya, a gift for the Isna Asharis. He wanted to guide us to the right path. And he wrote it in Farsi because those days in India, Farsi was the academic language of the Muslims, Shia and Sunni alike. And so Mir Hamid Hussain Musavi basically responded to him in the same language, in Farsi. And his book, basically what he did was he took all the arguments and objections of Shah Abdul Aziz Dahlawi and responded to it one by one. For example, on the Hadith of Ghadir, I think it's 2 or 3 volumes of the bulky type. During old times, the books were very long and bulky and handwritten scripts. And he basically deals with Hadith Ghadir in, I think, from what I remember, was 2 or 3 volumes of that size, where he starts with number 1, listing the name of the Sahaba of Rasulullah who had quoted this Hadith. Then he gives century-wise. This was the method devised by him. Then he talks about the second generation of Muslims, the Tabi'een, the disciples of the Sahaba, those who have recorded this Hadith. Then he goes to the muhaddiseen and the historians and the scholars of hadith, century-wise, till his own time. All scholars who have quoted this hadith in their books, he gives them their name 1 century after the other. In his research, he was able to list about 20 plus Sahaba who had quoted this hadith. Later on, another scholar during 60s, we have Abdul Hussain al-Amini, who wrote in Arabic, Al-Ghadir, in 11 volumes. And he basically continued the same method, listing the name of the Sahaba and then giving the list of all the scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah who recorded this hadith century-wise till his own time. He was able to actually increase the list of the Sahaba from 20 plus to 110 Sahaba. And then, we have another scholar who just died about 10 years ago, Abdul Aziz al-Tabatabai. He did further research, and the total number of the companions, the Sahaba, who have narrated Hadith Ghadir is 120. And this is the highest level of tawatur. Tawatur means a hadith which has been narrated by so many narrators that you cannot even doubt the validity or authenticity of that hadith. That kind of hadith is known as Sahih Mutawatir. It's even above Sahih. And Ghadir would be probably the first in the list of the Mutawatir hadith of the Shias and the Sunnis. As far as, some of these details I have in my book called Shia Islam, Imamat and Vilayat, where I talked about the issue of Ghadir. Abdul Aziz Tabatabai, actually he wrote an article on this issue. It's a very interesting title he gives. He says, its narrators are very many and very few. He says at the same time, means there is no hadith equal to Hadith Ghadir among the Shias or Sunnis. Because there is no hadith where the number of the narrators reaches to 120. So it is the most solid and authentic hadith in the world of Islam. But then he says also the narrators are very few, because he's looking at 120, comparing with the audience in Ghadir. How many were there? 120,000 people. And only 120 names we have in the narrators. So what is the percentage there? One person only? Or is it 0.1? So that's why he says, although there are many narrators, but by looking at the number of the audience, there are very few. But irrespective of that, as far as the authenticity of Hadith Ghadir is concerned, this is a hadith which is beyond, dispute by any credible alim of even the Sunnis. Then we go on to the second, the implications of this Hadith Ghadir, Hadith Saqalain. Number one, the Prophet says that Quran and Itrat are together. There is another phrase, I didn't put it in the writing here, where it says, لَنْ يَفْتَرِقَ حَتَّى يَرِدَ عَلَيَّ الْحَوْزِ. The Quran and the Itrat will not be separated from one another until they join me at the Hawz Kawthar in the hereafter. Since they cannot be separated, they must be same in many ways. Quran is immune from error. Itrat is also immune from error. This proves the ismat and infallibility of the Quran. You cannot separate one from the other. Secondly, the issue, and the Prophet uses the word not la, he says lan. In Arabic, there is a difference in when you use la, which no. But when you say lan, which means never. Lan yaftariqa means they will never be separated from one another. So what it means is that as long as Quran is there, you must always have an imam from the itrat of Rasulullah. And so, those who believe in this hadith, they should actually be looking for the imam of the time. If they don't believe, then there is a problem, because Rasulullah said, Lan yaftariqa, the Quran and the imam from his family cannot be separated. And it also means that, the wordings of the Prophet, where he says, Ma in tamassaktum bihima lam tadillu ba'di. If you hold on only to the Quran and not to the Ahlul Bayt, the chances of misguidance is still there. So you need the Quran, and you also need an imam from the family of the Prophet. Now when you bring up these statements about Hadith Ghadir, there is another hadith which is very widely quoted by many Sunni scholars as a counter to this Hadith Saqalain. And its same words are used. But what they say in there, if you can see it there, إِنِّي تَارِكُمْ فِيكُمْ مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُمْ بِهِ لَمْ تَضِلُّ بَعْدِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّتِي. They say, I am living among you, that as long as you hold on to it, you will never go astray. One is the book of Allah and the other is my sunnah. And this is a hadith quoted again and again and again. And as soon as you say, the Prophet says, Kitabullah wa itrati, they say, well, he says, Kitabullah wa sunnati. So how do you respond to it? Let me, check your memory. Hadith Saqalain was quoted in how many of the Sihah Sitta? 5 out of the 6. Let us look at this one. This version of so-called hadith that I am leaving behind, as long as you hold on to it, you will never go astray. One is Kitabullah and Sunnati. This is not there in any of the 6 books. Number 1. Bukhari doesn't have it, Muslim doesn't have it, Abu Dawood doesn't have it, Tirmidhi doesn't have it, Nisai doesn't have it, and the whole group. So it is not there. And it is only found in a book, the earliest books. We are not talking about later books. In earlier books, it's only found. The earliest mention of this is in Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik, who is the earliest Imam of the 4 Mazahib of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But the interesting thing is that even Imam Malik, he mentions this hadith in his book without sanad, without any chain of narrators. So it is called mursal. Mursal means without any chain of narrators going back to Rasulullah. And therefore, we can with total confidence we can say that this is a concocted hadith. It is not reliable, it is not sahih, and there is no basis for this at all. Even, for the sake of argument, but before that, let me just read to you something. There is a scholar in Jordan at the moment, and he basically is also in charge of responding to the religious questions that come to one of the media there in Jordan. And he will ask this question, that I see Hadith Saqalain, and then I see there are 2 versions of it. One says Kitabullah wa itrati, and another one is the one which says Kitabullah wa sunnati. Which one is authentic? And he basically gives his arguments there. He says, let me just read to you the preface and the conclusion. I'll leave all the arguments. Where he says, the correct and authentic hadith from the Prophet has the words, my and my Ahlul Bayt. Whereas the version which has my Sunnah instead of my Ahlul Bayt is not correct from the point of view of its sanad, the chain of narrators. And so then he goes into it. He looks at both hadiths, the narrators, and he says that the narrators of the version where it says Kitabullah wa itrati are all reliable and authentic, whereas the version where Kitabullah wa sunnati is there, he says first of all Imam Malik doesn't have any sanad at all, and those who come later on, they have come up with a sanad. One of them goes back to Abu Huraira, but he says if you look at the names in that chain of narrators, they are people who are liars, who used to fabricate hadith, and therefore those statements cannot be accepted. And this is a Sunni scholar. He concludes by saying the analysis clearly proves that the hadith with the text my sunnah is a fabrication by the narrators who were liars and attached to the establishment of the Umayyads. This version was invented in opposition to the correct version of my Ahlul Bayt. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the prayer leaders and the religious preachers to abandon the hadith which has not come from the Prophet, and instead they should familiarize the masses with the correct hadith which Imam Muslim has quoted in his Sahih with the words my itrati, my family, and which At-Tirmidhi has quoted with the words my family, my Ahlul Bayt. Tirmidhi's version says Kitabullah wa itrati Ahlul Bayti, further emphasizing that point. And so you have a contemporary Sunni scholar, Hassan bin Ali al-Saqaf, who himself, by studying it, says that the only acceptable version is the one which says, Kitabullah wa itrati. Salawat alayhi. Finally, even if we accept this, that the Prophet says, Kitabullah wa sunnati, for the sake of argument, isn't it the sunnah of the Prophet to love the Ahlul Bayt? Isn't it the sunnah of the Prophet to seek guidance from the Ahlul Bayt? And a bigger question is, who is the true custodian or preserver of the sunnah of Rasulullah? You have two different channels. One is the Sahaba and one is the Ahlul Bayt. And when you compare that, you see that Ahlul Bayt are the more secure and authentic channel to the sunnah of Rasulullah. So even if you go by this version, we don't see any problem as far as the Imamat of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salat is concerned. Let us now move on to so this was the first general nas, or the appointment made by Rasulullah about Ahlul Bayt in general. Although it was done at Ghadir, where Ali was appointed also specifically, but this statement of the Prophet, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمْ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي, is a general appointment by Rasulullah of Ahlul Bayt as the guides after himself. Let us now move on to the second one, the second general nas, and this is to do with the famous hadith of the Prophet where he now gives us the numbers of the imams who will be after him. And we'll just concentrate on that aspect, the number of the imams. And it's interesting that you can link that with the prophecy which is there also in the Bible about the 12 imams. But before we come to that, because the prophecy in Bible is actually in response to the dua of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam about Ismail and his descendants. And so let us look at the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. There's a very interesting conclusion to be derived from that. I said earlier, and I didn't want to talk about it, we just are focusing more on the imamats of the other imams. We believe that the imams cannot be appointed by individuals, by human beings. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll just make one statement here. We'll leave the ayat for some other time. There is not a single example in the Quran, not a single example in the Quran that ever, from Adam to the last prophet, an imam had been selected by the community themselves. Not a single example from any nations who came from Adam to Rasulullah. In all places you will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word ja'alna, ja'iluka, inni ja'iluka. Or he uses this word ja'ala, means I made it, I appointed it. And so he has always, linked this issue of imamat and leadership to himself. He has not given the choice to anyone. If you look at this, the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran, this is from Surah Baqarah, ayat number 124. I should have written the whole ayat there, but let me just read it to you. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was made the imam by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ayat says, وَإِذْ إِبْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلَمَاتٍ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put Ibrahim to test and trial, فَأَتَمَّهُنَّ. He succeeded in those tests and trials. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Ibrahim, إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. O Ibrahim, I am appointing you as an imam for the mankind. This is one more example where Allah is saying, I am appointing. Now this position of imamat was so dignified, honorable and important that Ibrahim had this desire. As a father, why not? He says, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. The words here. He says, oh Allah, you have made me imam. But what about my zurriya? Zurriya means itra. Itrati. You can replace that word. Wa-itrati. And oh Allah, what about my descendants? Will this imamat continue among them? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to Ibrahim by saying, لا ينال أحد الظالمين. He says, my covenant, my promise to you about Imamat in your descendants will not reach those who are Zalimin. Zalimin means what? Normally we say Zalim means unjust people. But if you look at the Quran, you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Luqman, Surah number 31, ayat 13, there you will see Allah defines zulm as shirk. Shirk is defined as zulmun azim. And so it's important to look at this concept of zalimin means mushrikeen. Allah says, Ibrahim, I promise you, this position of Imamat will continue among the descendants, but not among those who are mushrikeen. Now, keep in mind there are four possibilities in this statement where Ibrahim is saying, min dhurriyati. Four possibilities are there. Number one, either the descendant was a mushrik from before and he later on also is still a mushrik. Do you think Ibrahim was praying for that kind of a descendant to become an imam? No, it is not even in the equation of the dua of Ibrahim. The second possibility would be of a person, I'm using the Muslim here in a very generic sense, one who worships one Allah and then becomes mushrik later on. When Ibrahim says, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي, is he referring to one and two? Was he praying that somebody from his descendants who are mushrik in the later part of their life, they be made the imam? Of course not. He's not praying about this. He's only praying about the third and the fourth possibility. The fourth possibility is somebody who was a mushrik before and then becomes, a Muslim later on in the life. Or he is talking about somebody who was Muslim before and later on also. So the dua of Ibrahim doesn't, include one and two. Ibrahim is only talking about the category 3 and 4. And Allah is responding by saying, لا ينال أحد الظالمين. My promise will not go to those who are ظالمين, who are mushrikeen. Which is a mushrik group there. They were mushrik before. And so basically the ayat is saying that Allah will not accept the dua of Ibrahim for the third category. He will only accept it for the category number 4, where the individual is a worshipper of Allah from beginning till the end. And when you look at this, you come to realize that, the materialization of this dua of Ibrahim, cannot be applied to the Khulafa. They were mushrik before and they became Muslim later on. The only one who never bowed down his head to an idol among the Khulafa is Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. And that is why he is known as Karram Allahu Wajhu, which means, Allah has honored his face. Means his forehead and face is so honorable that he has never ever, done sajda to an idol. So remember this dua of Ibrahim and the response of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the context of 12 imams, that the Prophet talks about it, and we'll come to this after it, this same statement has been also mentioned in the Bible. If you look at this, the quotation in the box, Ibrahim prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding his son. And what is the response in the Bible? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He will have many, many descendants. 12 princes shall he beget, and I'll make him a great nation. Bible talks about 12 princes from Ismail. This doesn't refer to his own immediate children. I don't think he even had 12 children. This is referring to the descendants of Ismail. And if you look at history, the only area among the descendants of Ismail who could be classified as 12 princes or leaders or imams are only the imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam. So let us go to the hadith of Rasulullah where he says, this issue of 12 khulafa. There is a hadith again accepted by the Sunnis. There is no one who disputes this. And the wordings are from Bukhari where he says that the Prophet said, يَكُونُ إِثْنَ عَشَرَ عَمِيرًا كُلُّهُم مِّن قُرَيْشٍ. That after me there will be 12 chiefs. You can use the word chiefs or 12 princes in the same context. The Prophet says, after me there will be 12 chiefs, all of them from Quraysh. Now this is a hadith accepted by the Sunnis without any doubt, recorded by Bukhari, by Muslim, Ahmad bin Hanbal and others. And so I haven't yet seen a Sunni alim in any of his discussions refuting the authenticity of this hadith of Rasulullah. So as far as the authenticity of this hadith is concerned, that there will be 12 amirs or chiefs after me, nobody disputes that. Some of the versions said that the world will end with the 12th imam. Others say that Islam will last as long as the 12 imams are there. And so a very interesting implication of this hadith is that, if there are only going to be 12 imams after Rasulullah, and the world will survive as long as the 12 imams are there, it means one of them has to have a long, long, long life. So this concept of long life can also be derived from this hadith of Rasulullah. Because some of the versions say that the world will end with the 12th imam from the Quraysh. I don't want to go into the details of different versions of this, but this is the gist and the spirit of the hadith. And the Sunni scholars are really confused about it. They don't deny the authenticity of this hadith, but they don't know how to explain it. And I'll give you just some examples. One is from Ibn al-Arabi. He is a commentator of Sahih al-Tirmidhi, one of the 6 books. And he says there are 2 ways of looking at it. Either we go by the sequence of the Khulafa, from Abu Bakr to 12 Khulafa. That's one way of looking at it. But he says there's a problem with that. If we go by that list, you have Yazid in there. And he says, we can't have Yazid among the 12, so dignified Khulafa or Amirs that Rasulullah talks about. And so he says, okay, we don't go by the sequence, we go by the character. He says, if you look at the character, we only get 4 Khulafa Rashidin. This is how he counts. And one of them, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, was a relatively just Khalifa. So he says, we only get 5. And at the end he says, وَلَمْ أَعْلَمْ لِلْحَدِيثِ مَعْنَا. And I don't know how to explain this hadith. I don't have any, proper explanation for this hadith. Some of them are trying to say, well, what it means is that there will be at least 12 khulafa. But the question is, where did you get this at least? Even the English version of Sahih Bukhari, if you read this hadith there, the translation, you see the translator has used, put these words there, at least 12 khulafa. Well, hadith doesn't say that. It talks about the 12 khulafa in sequence. Some of them say, well, what it means is that there will be 12 khulafa during the lifespan of Islam, but not necessarily in sequence. And some of them actually say that 4 of them have passed away among the 12, the Khulafa Rashidun. Others we are still waiting. We are waiting for the other Umara and Khulafa that Rasulullah has mentioned. And some of them say that, well, it refers to the 12 Khulafa during the peak of the Islamic civilization or the Islamic political power. So these are all the different interpretations that they give. But the interpretation itself proves that they do not doubt the authenticity of this hadith. Nobody has ever questioned the authenticity of this hadith. Let me now go to the Sunni alim by the name of Al-Hafiz Sulaiman al-Qanduzi al-Hanafi. He has a very famous book called Yanabi ul-Mawadda, where he talks about the Ahlul Bayt most of the time. And there he has looked at this hadith. And he comes to a very interesting conclusion. He says this hadith cannot be applied on Khulafa Rashidun because there are only 4. They are not 12. Then he says it cannot be applied on Umayyad Khulafa because there are more than 12 and they were mostly zalim and tyrants. Then he says it cannot even be applied to Banu Abbas because they were again more than 12 and most of them were tyrants. And so he comes to the conclusion that the only group in the world of Islam on whom this hadith can apply are the 12 Imams from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. We can actually extend this argument and say that not only this hadith doesn't apply to Khulafa Rashidun collectively or Umayyan, Abbas, actually within our own Shia circles. You have the Ismaili groups. It would not even apply to this last group of Khulafa, the Ottoman caliphs, which ended in the first war, the empire, because they were not Quraysh. And Rasulullah said all of them would be from Quraysh. Secondly, when it comes to the Ismaili Imams referring to both the Agha Khani and the Bohri. The Agha Khani have exceeded the number, they are 42. The Bohris have ended up with number 22. So even this hadith doesn't even apply to the other 2 groups among the Shias. This hadith only applies to the Shia Isna Ashariya, those who believe in the 12 Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Inshallah we'll talk about why I'm using the word Ismailiya for both Agha Khani and Bohri. We'll talk about it when we talk about the Imamat of the 7th Imam. But going back to Hafiz Sulaiman Qanduzi al-Hanafi, he actually has given one more version of this hadith. In Bukhari, the Prophet says, that after me there will be Isna Ashara Amiran kulluhum min Quraysh. Now, if you look at the narrations, you will see Jabir bin Samra, the famous narrator of this, he says that, the Prophet said, يكون 12 أميرا فقال كلمة لم أسمعها. He says, after saying that there will be 12 chiefs after me, he said something I didn't hear. So I asked my father who was there. فقال أبي قال كلهم من قريش. Then my father told me that the Prophet said all of them will be from Quraysh. Now this statement itself, shows that there was some probably, intentional changing of the words. Because we see Sulaiman al-Qanduzi al-Hanafi quoting one version of the hadith where the Prophet says not only that kulluhum min Quraysh, rather he says kulluhum min Bani Hashim. He even specifies this, not only the whole Quraysh, but the specific group from the Quraysh. And even the Prophet, for Amir al-Mu'minin himself, in one of the khutbahs he says, إن الأئمة من قريش غرسوا في حاض البطن من هاشم. He says, surely the Imams are from the Quraysh, as the Prophet said, but they have been planted in this branch of Hashim. Not all the branches of Quraysh, only from Banu Hashim. It does not suit others, nor would others be suitable as rulers. And so we also have this confirmation that this hadith applies only to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam and no one else. So we see that basically we have dealt with the 2 general appointments from Rasulullah about the Ahlul Bayt in general. One is Hadith Saqalain, and the other is this hadith from Sahih Bukhari, where the Prophet talks about 12 Amirs or the Imams. Different words have been used. Sometimes he uses the word Khalifa, sometimes Amir, sometimes even A'imma. And we see that both these statements are very clear nas about the appointment of Ahlul Bayt as the Imams after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any questions? We have about 5 minutes. Yes. Well, the literal meaning, what the meaning that we have discussed is the technical meaning. The literal meaning of the Shia means somebody who follows. But if you see in any Arabic book the word Ash-Shia with Alif Lam, it refers to those who believe in Ali and follow Ali, who believe in Ali as the first successor of the Prophet and those who follow him. It comes from the term Shi'atu Ali, followers of Ali. Gradually it became just Shia. For example, the name of the city where the Prophet is buried, what is it? Besides Mecca, what is the other holy city? Medina. Its complete name was Madinatul Rasul or Madinatul Nabi, the city of the messenger. But gradually people just, shorten it to Medina. Medina means a city. And similarly, the term was Shi'atu Ali, the followers of Ali. But then it became, common among all Muslims. A Shia means somebody who follows and believes in Ali as the first Khalifa. Well, I'm not promoting my book, but I can refer to, so I don't have to say so much. If you look at this book, there is a discussion about it right in the beginning, the name Shia. You know how the word Shia has been used in the Quran? And you will see, the interesting thing is that Muslims take pride in saying that we are Muslims, and this name was given to us by Ibrahim alayhi salam. Because he prayed that, Allah, make my descendants, Muslimin. And he himself has been described in the Quran as Muslim. There is an ayat in Surah Al Imran, ayat 67, where Allah says, ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا. Ibrahim was not a Jew or a Christian, ولكن كان حنيفا مسلما. He was a sincere Muslim, means somebody who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was not from the mushrikeen. Now we see Ibrahim is described as a Muslim in the Quran. Then there is another description of Ibrahim. And this is in Surah number 37, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describing the prophets, he says, وَسَلَامٌ عَلَى نُوحٍ فِي الْعَالَمِينَ. Salamun on Nuh. Then going on, then he comes and he talks about Ibrahim. And how does he describe him? Allah says, وَإِنَّ مِنْ شِيعَتِهِ لِإِبْرَاهِيمَ. And from the Shias of Nuh is Ibrahim, because Ibrahim came later on. So what I'm saying is that Ibrahim was described as a Muslim as well as a Shia by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. So we shouldn't feel, in any way embarrassed, or sometimes people say, oh, I'm just a Muslim. Well, I'm a Muslim who's a Shia, just as Ibrahim has been described as a Muslim and a Shia in the Quran. Of course, in Quran, Ibrahim has been described as a Shia of Nuh, but I am a Shia of Ali. Oh yes, there is a long, very extensive discussion even among them. They actually justified by saying that we wanted to. This is the interesting thing. This is the argument even used by the Khulafa. In order to maintain the priority of the Quran, we didn't want Hadith to become more important, so we basically pushed it down. This is their rationale for it. But the reason was something else. Because you see later on, although it was forbidden to put it in written form, but still it was circulating from one generation to another. And so this issue of, deletion, addition, or trying to bring down the ahadith about the Ahlul Bayt, and adding other words where others are also included there. This is something which is acknowledged by them also. Yes. Okay, let me see if I can do that. Yeah. I've done it previously, so this time, this was the first session, so I'll see. Okay. Yeah. No. He was a Shaykh al-Islam. He was, in a way, Chief Qazi during the Ottoman period. No, he's not the chief of the Hanafi. No. That's Abu Hanifa. He is a follower of the Hanafi madhab. Yeah. His book is very famous. The title is Yanabi al-Mawadda, which means the streams of law of Ahlul Bayt. Yeah. Yes. When we'll be talking about the fourth Imam and the fifth Imam's Imamat, because one of the things we are going to do is, when we talk about the Imamat of each Imam, we'll also look at the split which took place after fourth Imam and the sixth Imam and the eighth Imam. That's where we'll discuss the Zaydi group in more detail. And the Ismaili group will come when we talk about the seventh Imam, because that's where the split between what we call Shish Imami and the Isna Ashari started. Yes. Well, the word Imam there is being used just in an honorary, not as in when we use the term Imam for Imam Ali. That is used as an Imam appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you use that for Imam Malik, that's just an honorary. It's just like you say Imam Rizvi. It's no different than that. That's not greater than that. So it's more, it's a laqab, not really a designation or a position. What the Sunnis do is they use different words for the rulers. They call them khulafa. But when it comes to the scholars, they call them imams. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.